Good Monday morning! Today I want to talk about how negative thought patterns are sometimes learned habits. I am MPJ and you are watching Fun Function. I am back from Christmas break. I am here in my studio space, or rather, this is actually not my studio place. My studio place is upstairs. This is like the co-working space. Normally there's people here, but I'm recording this at night. So I figured, like, what the hell? Like, since there's nobody here, let's use the space. So I want to do a soft start to this year and talk about something else than coding. That is something that I have done from time to time on this channel, but it was quite a while ago and I felt it was time today. I want to talk about how negative thought patterns can sometimes actually be learned habits. What I mean by negative thought patterns are these thinking traps that we tend to get caught up in and have a hard time getting out of. Even if both you and I struggle with negative thought patterns, the thinking traps that you get caught up in are probably different from mine, because there are many different kinds of thinking traps. Blaming yourself, mind reading, fortune telling, downplaying positives, many of them. You can Google thinking traps actually to find good lists of them. And the whole habit thing that I'm going to talk about in this episode, it's going to apply to a lot of them, but I am going to use a specific one in this episode, because one that I suffer from a lot, which is catastrophizing. But before I get into catastrophizing, I want to talk about what a habit is. What is a habit? An example habit of mine is my morning coffee. A habit has three components: trigger, action, and reward. So, for example, for my morning coffee habit, getting into the office is the trigger. It's what activates my habit. After the trigger comes the action, which is, the actual habit that you do, sort of. The going into the kitchen and making some coffee. After the action comes the reward. The reward it's almost always the trickiest component to figure out what it is. It might be that I like the bitter taste. It might be that I like the warmth after getting in from a cold bicycle ride. It might be that it's just me putting off work. And for some habits, the reward doesn't always happen when you execute the action. Maybe it's just once or twice per month that I've gotten that really good cup of coffee that just hits just right with the caffeine levels and I just feel really good about it. Maybe that just happened like once per year or something, but I'm still doing the action in the hopes of repeating that thing again. But the point is that there is always a reward behind every habit somehow. Trigger, action, reward. Habits are incredibly powerful things. In our brains, habits are stored in a different place than memories. And we know that because there are people that have gotten certain kinds of irreversible brain damage that causes them to be they are unable to form new memories, but they can form new habits. So the caretakers of these people with the brain damage, they took them for walks, daily walks, and the caretakers had to go with them because naturally, if you cannot remember more than 5 minutes back, then that means that you can very easily get lost. And one day, when the caretakers didn't pay attention, the patient just walked off out of the house, and they everybody pretty much panicked because they had no idea, they had no way of tracking this person down, and they were very worried. But the person just eventually showed back up. So of course they had walked this path, this daily walking path on their own, even though they could not consciously know where they were. They just intuitively knew what to do. Like every little thing during the path triggered a habit loop. So habits can be very complex, and that's also why I sometimes just find myself holding a cup of coffee in my hand, even though I had resolved not to drink any more coffee that day. So habits: trigger, action, reward, and you do that enough times and it's burned into your brain. Now, let me tell you about catastrophizing. For example, the trigger for my catastrophizing can be that I'm feeling a bit tired one day and I have a bit of a headache. The action that I take in response to this headache is to try to find some reason for it. Maybe I'm starting to get sick or something. And once my brain goes down that path, there are just a few tiny steps to terminal brain cancer. Another example would be me getting, some bad feedback at work, and then I just extrapolate that to getting fired, never getting another job, and then killing myself because I've been ostracized from society. So basically, catastrophizing is when we take a small event or mistake that we made and then extrapolate that to catastrophic proportions. And up until a few weeks ago, I figured that this was just the way I am. I figured that I was just an anxietic person, and that was the end of it. But recently, I've learned that these negative thought patterns, these fuckers, they are very often learned habits. Remember now how I said before that the reward is the least obvious component of the habit. It is really tricky to see what the reward would be in the case of catastrophizing. I've known about how habits work for years and years and years, but I've never made a connection to catastrophizing because it just seemed ludicrous to me how I could be doing it for a reward. Catastrophizing is quite literally the #1 source of pain in my life. I just thought it absurd that I would be doing it for a reward. But, well, it turns out that I do, and this is how it works. Let's say that I get a letter from the tax office. Before I have the opportunity to open the letter, my brain is like, here we go, and ends up on this being back taxes for the last 10 years, and I'm going to be living on the street, but only after I've been in jail. Now, so far, this is all just completely unnecessary and irrational suffering, but after I open the letter, I get my reward. Because, of course, when I open the letter, there's actually nothing dangerous in it. It's just some random information from them that is not even relevant to me. That is a huge relief, which is a super positive emotion. And this is why catastrophizing is so rewarding. If I hadn't been catastrophizing, opening that letter would just have been meh, like a neutral emotion. But because I did, I was now saved from a life in poverty, having my life taken away, and I'm now free. Essentially, I get rewarded for my catastrophizing with this hit of dopamine. And that is how negative thought patterns like catastrophizing are learned and reinforced as habits. They are triggered, often by some negative event, like the tax letter. Then you do the action, the thought pattern, in my case the catastrophizing. And then finally I get my reward, which is the relief of reality not being as bad as the insane catastrophe I've created in my brain. And that's it. That's my big learning from the holidays. You have just watched an episode of Fun Function. I release these every Monday morning, 0800 GMT. You can watch another episode of the show by clicking here, and if you are a patron of Fun Function, you have access to the Fun forum, and there is a dedicated discussion thread for this video by clicking here. You can also find it in the episode description. I am MPJ. Until next Monday morning, stay curious.